Good afternoon. My name is Richard Miller, and I welcome you to Never Not Here. And we're going to have a interesting dialogue on the open mic series. And of course, open mic is for you. So give a call and come on and express your views and well, make yourself visible. So that please help me welcome Mora Fields. Hi, Mora.
Hello, Richard. Nice to see you.
That's something that I wanted to say about you because, you know, in fact, all authors, they make themselves visible. And somehow when you have some kind of an insight into life, in the case that you write about it, also you are living that, probably because that's how you figured it out, or that's how you found that that's meaningful in your life, so it could be meaningful in others. And so then making yourself visible is something that not all of us do.
Yeah, that's true. Although making yourself visible in a book, there's still some level of invisibility to that. But I see what you mean. Yes, it's putting out your own ideas and thoughts and whatever it is you've come to out there. Yeah.
Right. Somebody might even say, hey, you're crazy. It's meaningless.
Yeah, and I think that's happened a few times with this book. I mean, there have been people that have read this book who, you know, it's a children's book, and it's not actually billed as any kind of non-dual presentation of anything. And so there have been people who don't have that kind of interest who've read this book and just gone, what? What? But there have also been other people who don't have that non-dual kind of interest either, who've read it and gone, this is really interesting. You know, this is, you know, something I never really thought about like that before, and I'm finding that really interesting. So, you know, it's all out there.
You know, actually, I want to go into it, but, you know, I really don't think it's a children's book, number one, and children can partake of it. And actually, it's kind of a healing book. And a simple book is, I don't know, is a complex book more important, or somehow reaching truths that are, in other words, if life is complex, we need a complex book to unravel it, right? But if life is really simple, we need a simple book to unravel it, or simple teaching or pointing.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, what happens to us is that we get very convoluted in our, well, conditioned really is a better way to say it. We get so conditioned from the time we are children that if we talk about seeing as we saw as children and sort of trying to step back a bit before some of that craziness invaded us about believing our thoughts and all that stuff, and if we start trying to see before that, and we do that kind of in the spirit of having been children. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have made that same comment that maybe this is not entirely a children's book. I actually wrote it as a children's book with that in mind, but I can see a lot of people's points that it's not just for children.
Well, children are lucky, you know, to have a book that's accessible even for them. And I think adults are lucky also.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to see it that way. That's nice. I actually wrote this book because, should I say something about what the book is before we go on?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, this is a book called Peculiar Stories, and there's, I don't know, 12 or 13 stories in there. The main character is this Uncle E, and then his niece, who's 9. And so Uncle E is kind of a bohemian guy who's come back to his small town and has very much of a bond with this niece. And so they get into these adventures that are quite philosophical in nature because of the way he asks her to look at what's going on. And so it's written from her point of view, so you can kind of see her thought processes and her questions. And for example, the first story is about coming over to swing in Uncle E's yard where he's built a wonderful swing for her, and how he's questioning her while she's swinging about what exactly is it that's still and what's in motion. And of course, she starts out, they're called peculiar stories because Uncle E is considered a slight bit peculiar. And so she starts out swinging and saying, well, I'm moving and everything else is still. But then the more he questions her and asks her, how do you know this? How can you really be sure of this? She starts to consider that perhaps that's not the way it is. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. She never really comes to a conclusion about that, but she's forced to say, I may not know exactly how this is. I may not know what's going on here. And so the end of the story ends there where she says, I don't know, because he's kind of convinced her with a lot of good arguments that maybe it isn't her that's moving, maybe everything else is. So this is kind of a weird premise, really, if you have never considered this before. But actually, this premise is what the theory of relativity is about. And I have a friend who's a well-respected physicist in the field of relativity, and he read this story and he said, this story should be in the introduction to every college level textbook on relativity. And I hadn't even really thought about that, but
yeah.
this is sort of a concrete example of what relativity might look like if you were to truly accept that.
First, I got to ask you, do you have an Uncle E?
I didn't. I didn't wish I had.
Is your brother named Ed? Maybe your daughter's got an Uncle E.
No Uncle E's in the family that I know of, but I do know some people that could be good candidates for Uncle E that have that kind of lightness about them and spirit of curiosity.
I was a boater for a long time in rivers. Actually, was a kayaker, but I did also rafting. But that's a great, I don't know if you mean relativity like, Einstein type relativity, physics relativity, but relative motion is cool in a river because you're moving with the water, which is important so you don't hit a wave or something. And you're moving with the land, which is the sum of the water plus your movement in the water, and you don't want to hit a rock. And then, there's three relative motions there. And so then you got to you take on another kind of view where you're taking them all in at once. And then you could say, well, one is more true than the other. My motion with the water is more important. And whammo, you hit a rock and you say, oh, well, the land is important too,
Yes, that's exactly the same kind of situation that could have been used as the example as well. I mean, it's truly how, what you decide about your perceptions, which determines how you see things.
Right. In other words, you never say in any of the stories that one perception is right over another one. You're just saying, hey, there's a lot of ways to look at things, and there's a great freedom in that.
Yeah. Like the story about the thought machine. I kind of that one. Did you read that one?
I read them all, of course. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's where her uncle helps her and some of her friends for a science project to build a thought machine. And of course, she's very taken aback at the idea that there could be such a thing as a thought machine. But then they build this thing, and he explains to her how this machine receives the thought waves. It's not, and she doesn't like the idea that she's not the one that's generating these thought waves, but that she's just receiving these thought waves, and then they go through various filters and become thoughts, her thoughts, or what she thinks of as her thoughts. And so that's another one where, it doesn't tell you in the end how thoughts really work, if there is such a thing, but just that there might be various ways to perceive it, and we don't necessarily have to believe that we generate them.
So the filters, it doesn't really explain what the filters are and stuff, but I mean, these are, some of the neat things are like when she says, well, I couldn't really understand which, whether I was moving or whether everything else was moving, but I can't seem to get that out of my mind. It's always popping up, and so then
Oh, yeah.
without telling somebody to, do a spiritual practice or something like that. I mean,
Right.
she's just saying that the interest in that dynamic in which, and how many different ways you can look at things is captivating enough that it just keeps coming back to in my mind.
Right.
And so then,
Because nobody can come to these seeings for you. And so telling somebody anything about anything is not helpful, I don't think. Although it can be, but hopefully the main thing is to, start to question what your ideas are of reality. And you have to question them for yourself.
so you said telling anybody about anything is probably not helpful, and I don't know. And in the beginning, you mentioned non-duality. I mean, I guess non-duality is always telling people about something, which is supposedly nothing, right? But did you have a background in non-duality, or I mean, you seem comfortable to say the word.
Well, I've had a lot of spiritual teachers in my time that I've been to a lot of satsangs, done a lot of reading. Right now, I go to a center in Eugene, Oregon called the Center for Sacred Sciences, which is basically taking the teachings from a wide variety of mystics and presenting them, and then talking about we talk about how these teachings apply to us. I mean, how we have come to see them or not come to see them, but we just kind of, we have a couple of groups when we share our inspirations or our understandings. But yeah, we're talking about it. We're still talking. We're always talking about it.
Is that like a discussion group or I mean, is that like a satsang where the leader comes and then or speaks, or is that more like a discussion group, or do you key off a book, say, let's read chapter such and so of I am that, and then we'll discuss it, or how does it work?
Yeah. Well, there's some teachers at this center, and this center was started by a guy named Joel Morwood, who, I hate to use these words anymore, enlightened, wake up, whatever, but, he seems to be speaking from his own experience about a non-dual reality. And then he has several other teachers who have woken up over the course of the center, and so they now teach also. And it's not really a satsang situation like so many groups are these days. It's more Sunday talks, and then these teachers conduct these discussion groups, which usually do focus around a book. We'll read a book, and then we'll talk about them, and we'll have this teacher there to sort of bring us back on track.
You mean it's not their book?
It's not their book.
Hmm.
Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the book written by Joel. He just a couple years ago published a book after teaching for 25 years that tried to present his teachings. But his teachings are all, actually just verifications and maybe explications of the teachings of the mystics. So Buddha, Jesus, Ramana Maharshi, all kinds of Dzogchen teachers, Jewish teachers, So
that was his book about the other teachers?
His book is called The Way of Selflessness. And he quotes from all these mystics and then offers you might say, his commentary and his own way of directing us towards these. He feels that even though these things can't be taught, what can be taught is just beginning to break down our conditioning so that we actually are ready and able to really grok some of these teachings. But our conditioning is what, our thinking, the way we buy into our thinking is so much prevents us from being still. And many teachers start from the other end with, just be still, just stop. But he says you can't just stop. You gotta, you gotta throw a few spanners in the works and slow down and start to see how it is that this whole mechanism is working, that is, stopping us from being open to what is really here.
That seems to be what works best for me. I tend to be, I'll admit it's kind of intellectual, but to try to see the mechanism of how thoughts come up and how they follow interest, and how interest is focused mostly on our beliefs about what we need. That's well, people call it survival, but like if we have a lot of ideas that we're incomplete and that we need stuff. And just lately, we kind of just put something on a website this morning that was a new forum topic called sustainability and scarcity. And I want to see if people want to talk about that. What the heck is scarcity, and is there really such a thing? Of course, there's a scarcity in this moment if you say, "Oh, how many apples are there?" and it's only that many, and there's one more person than that, or something like that. But then, really, the part that's not scarce is human energy. I mean, I guess it's limited, but I mean, we can apply it however we want. And then resources like the sun. Everybody's got the sun, and that kind of is making all life go around. And if we would, use that in a way that it's offered, I guess we'd all be rich, or we'd all be satisfied, right? Or we'd all be whole or complete. And
I don't know. I mean, I'll take a look at that and see where you're going with it.
There's not much there. I only put a couple of posts on. Actually, I could put a couple of movies. I had a movie of actually a sustainability class in a university. They invited me in to film it. And then I found something from TED that was about an idea. Sharing with a complete stranger. Wow. And apparently that's happening a lot, Just even with sharing or, reselling stuff like eBay and stuff like that, Craigslist. And then actually lending people stuff, renting people stuff, or sharing those zip cars and stuff like that. When people don't even have a car, they just share a car for a while.
Yeah,
she said something really funny, She said, "How many of you have a electric drill in your garage?" The lifetime of that electric drill is usually used 12 minutes in a lifetime, and all you needed was that hole, but now you got a drill.
Right.
So we love to get stuff, but we don't even love it. We hate stuff, but I mean, we needed that once.
Mm-hmm. We think we need it. I live in a small town or outside of a small town in Oregon. And it's just I've been here, 6 years now. It's just a lovely experience living in this town because there are a lot of younger people in this town who've come here to have a different kind of life, and to get back to the land and a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's very nice because that is a big value I see, is sharing stuff and reusing stuff and not buying stuff, and riding bikes and and helping other people. I've been in this town, and I think about 10 times now there's been benefit night at the pub. You come down because somebody's husband got hurt on some way or other, and can't work, and so, or somebody's left their spouse and the spouse doesn't have any money for the mortgage or whatever, and then there's a party, and people just give money, and the pub gives money, or maybe it's not money, maybe it's help with work or something, but and then the person, I mean, it's like, wow, I mean, you always hear about this, but, people actually do it. That's very cool for me.
That is really amazing, you know. I got to say this because I was talking, in some of the previous conversations and even with psychologists and stuff, saying that maybe our new style of living where everybody's kind of isolated and alone and independent, and we say the good part is our independence, but the bad part is we're lonely, right? And I was saying like maybe in a village, in an older style of living that was maybe 1,000 years ago or something, so many things were not problems because everybody didn't have to do everything because the village was there. That, I mean, even if people were in dementia or something like that, there was still a place for them to just be there and play with the kids or tend to, the sheep or something like that. It wasn't really all this catastrophic. He said, I live just 50 miles out of London, and it's kind of like a village, and it's really more restrictive than anything I ever had in a town. So I guess people are going to have a real square head no matter what. But
Yeah.
you're reporting a village that really cares and that includes.
Yes, I mean, in many respects, and not in all respects, but I just see a lot more of it than I'm used to seeing. And, people still have their differences, and there's a faction of the town that maybe doesn't like the newer people coming in, and so it's all a hodgepodge, of course, but it's just been a pleasure to see that part of it.
It would be cool if all the new people kind of got together, even in the pub, and started to say, okay, let's see all the guys that are the original pillars here. Let's build some honor. Let's do something that honors them.
Yeah.
That we could have this city has been started, and that we could be here, and it's so cool. And these original pillars, these families, and they could really, I don't know what. I don't have a clue what, but somehow include them.
Yes, I think that's a very wise suggestion. I do. Yeah, because that's what happens, we can be very into our new way of doing things and forget that we're standing on the shoulders of our past. Even though there is no past, we know that.
No, of course that we're standing on the shoulders and all that, but then we're saying we're inclusive. But in a way, we're inclusive just with us. And then those other guys that say they don't want it, we say, well, the hell with those guys, because they're just rednecks.
Right.
And or something, or maybe something less than that. We don't have to give it a real hard name, but still we're not including them in a way, right?
Right. Yeah, and there's some of that, although I think there's some awareness of that too, and wanting to, do it differently to be more inclusive. But here we are, all human in a little town together.
Right. Because for so long, I guess we all thought that just sitting around and listening to satsang and being peaceful and meditating and talking about non-duality was all there was to life. But that's really pretty shallow, I'm finding. If you're living it, if you're not living it.
Right.
If you're not making yourself visible.
I'm not sure about that visible part. I mean,
it's risky. I don't know. Guess what? I in the last week I went to Jehovah's Witness Church, which I wouldn't have thought of before of going to. But I mean, that's one thing they do is they make themselves visible.
Yes. You went to their church service, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really pretty cool in a way because they have some readings and then they attach it to the Bible and read that part, and then there's a moderator, and then just people from the congregation say, well, what did that mean to them? And then they go around, I mean, and so then I guess they're building a force of missionaries, and getting people used to speaking, right? In one way, but in another way, I mean, it's inclusive and your opinion counts. I don't know if you've maybe I'll try it and see if I put a little wider opinion in there, what they say, maybe they'll say, okay, enough of that. Well, I don't know, but anyhow, uh, I think something about making your, of course I do video, see, and so then I like to video people and have them make themselves visible, and some people are kind of reluctant. So then I'm
Mhm.
always kind of egging them on, saying, come on, get on the video. At least you'll be able to see yourself.
Yeah, you got a point. And I
Yeah.
can see you too.
Yeah, we don't see it, and we see everybody but ourselves, right? And then we burden the world with this thing we're carrying around and these behaviors we're doing without even taking a second look at it. And then
Hmm.
just say, well, tough luck for you guys, you know, you like it or lump it. And then we
Yeah.
wonder why we don't have any friends, right?
I imagine, is there a video of you on the website? Because I would think that doing what you're doing is its own spiritual unfolding and path and practice and result all rolled into one, and that you might have some interesting things to say about it.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, every video's of me, right?
Yeah. Well,
Nah,
not really.
yeah,
It is, but ostensibly it's, the person you're talking to. Well, it's the dialogue that's created.
right.
And the subject matter starts out to be something that's related to the person you're talking to. So what if the subject matter started out to be about you? That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, my story. Well, my story's not all that cool, but I mean, or I can embellish it too, or the way I tell it, and people might think it's really cool, And then I don't know. Uh,
Your story, yeah, you're um, just a dialogue that might evolve between you and uh, someone else where you were the subject. That's what I mean.
okay, how would we start it?
Well, if I were the person speaking with you, um, I'd kind of want to know what what have you seen and experienced about uh, people and their stories, and um, just the way life is through doing this kind of work.
Well, in a way, I mean, I guess I'm more cerebral, and so I do try to kind of think this out and kind of watch it. Or I don't know if that's cerebral, but I'm just watching something from an interpreted view more than watching something just from a feeling and just feeling the feeling. Some people just like to get into how it all feels, and then they might even believe that words get in the way, but I don't think they do get in the way of feelings. But in the meantime, it depends on what we do with our attention, because many times a part of our attention is very mono-focused. It's just on one thing at a time. I tend to have an attention that really concentrates and then throws everything away and goes on something totally new, right? And even without the words, the ones that are feeling, see, I believe it's words, and words meaning like a story or an unsaid story, which is like just a belief that may be quite unconscious. I believe that's basically what we're reacting to in every moment. We're not reacting to anything that's out there. The only way we can touch anything is through some kind of a description that we have. Or, one time I used to call it past tense recognition. Just,
Past tense recognition. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I
It,
see what you mean.
it just
It's
means
because
a pattern, a thought pattern, a memory pattern.
yeah.
So somehow it's a memory pattern. Of course, a memory, is said many, many times, is way, way more than just a picture, because it has a label and it has boundaries, and it has a meaning, and then it has a significance. That meaning has a significance how I think it relates to my life, and then there's a plus or minus on it, whether it's really adding to my life or detracting from my life. And then if it keeps coming when I don't want it, there's an emotion to it, like get lost. This again, oh my God. You know, and it might be quite anxious if it's just like a static part of my life that just feels like a sore spot or a dead spot. And so then there's, you know, all my moods actually come through a story. Or I know they can come through a story because just go to the movies. That's a story is told, and you can have a mood, emotion. You can flash with anger. You can get hot, you know, just with like, how could they, with that sense of injustice, like how could they have done that? I mean, everything happens. And whether there, you know, this might be my question to people is like, is there some kind of a emotion or something that doesn't have a thought behind it? And I'm not so sure. And sometimes they flash so fast that you think, I think there was a thought there, but I didn't see it, you know. You know, you go for it. Oh my God, no. Well, even if someone falls in the river or something, you want to get them out, you know, or something like that, you know. I mean, I
No,
don't know.
I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's really, but so much. Let's just say so much of it. Why do I have to? I don't really have to say that it's always like this. So, but so much of our experience is about the story we tell, and that's why I love your book, because your book is about alternative stories, and each story would have a different feeling to it, and a different mood to it, and a different kind of like whether you're wasting energy or whether you're conserving energy or whether you're applying energy to use it to do something that, you know, is life affirmative. And so then that's kind of a key to life for me. Key to life would be that we're able to not get lost in throwing a lot of our energy away in friction or in anxiety or just in, I guess it's just anxiety basically, you know, thinking and being blocked by it and saying, I can't go on, this life is senseless, I never get what I want, people don't treat me right, you know, you look at all those things and then you block up and stop. And somehow the alternative point of view somehow is missing. You're not seeing it. Not that there is one, but just anyone. Just take anyone, you know.
Right. So you're run by what seems to be a belief about how things are, rather than realizing that's only one of many things that arise, or explanations of what arises. Doesn't mean anything any more than any other one. Like you just said, you could pick any one.
Basically, they're all abstractions. You could
Yeah.
look at it that way too. They're all a word pattern, and they're all a series of, what could you say? I used to say a lot, you know, there's a symbolic description or interpretation of what life is. It's like a verbal model, I call it a lot of times. Each one is a different verbal model, but life is different than a verbal model. But life comes before. And life is, you know, a verbal model is not necessarily attached to life so much. It's more attached to the verbal model I said yesterday, or the one I remember, or the one somebody told me. So it doesn't really attach that much, you know. So sometimes it could be fun. It could be a good game, working in verbal models. But sometimes if it's fun, go ahead and do it, you know. But if it's not that much fun, and if it kind of doesn't really allow your life to share and open up and kind of take in what's here, then it's not a very good verbal model. And then somehow you could search for another one, or actually find that none of them are any better than any other one, so that you might as well just toss them all. Not that there would be a place with no verbal models, with no interpretations. Not that there should be. That's a big hang-up with non-duality. People think that there should be a place that there's just truth, and it's very spacious, and it's very peaceful. And then, of course, you never get there because you're a human and you've got a thought machine. So that's very frustrating too, right?
Well, I think you don't have to, once you see that it possibly is just a thought machine, it doesn't matter what it, you know, shows up with. You can
Right
say,
on.
oh, it's that one.
Right on. But do you have to be, like 50 or 60 to figure it out, like me, or can you figure it out when you're 20 or 30?
There's a teacher in this area. He's 27, and he gives satsangs. I've been going to hear him.
What's his
27.
name?
His name is Ross Oldenstadt, and he didn't have any teachers himself. He just had a lot of suffering in his life, and he sort of retreated into he was an artist, and he just spent a lot of time just watching his mind, watching how it worked. And this guy became he eventually just saw how it worked. He saw how this was all created, and how none of it was any more significant than any of the rest of it. And he found a real freedom there. And he's teaching now. He's 27 years old. I think that's great. And he doesn't, he little by little, he's starting to get a little more spiritual jargon in his speech, but he had no teachers, and he just sort of came to this on his own, which was why I was so attracted to him, because it was so fresh to hear just his way of speaking about this. But now he's done a little more reading, and he knows that there's this whole community of people who are interested in this and have written about it and all, and so he's picking up some of their language just as shortcuts we all do.
There's a guy in Toronto, Mike Thielman. He's probably 22 now, but I think he started teaching when he was 19.
Wow, yeah.
There's a guy in Holland that is actually Brazilian. I don't know if I can say his name. Benigno or something like that. No, I'm losing it. But anyhow, Massaro, I think his name is. And he's in his early 20s, like 22 or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a guy in Seattle that's now 33, Khan. What's his first name? They're gonna hit me when they hear this. I'm not coming up with his first name, but anyhow.
And Ramana Maharshi was 16. We all know that. So, I don't know that age is the thing.
Right. When you were saying about the teacher and the discussion groups, and you were saying he's got some sense of non-dual reality, I think you said. And I wanted to say, well, if I may ask, do you know, what is that to you? Non-dual reality. What comes across to you when you discuss that?
Well, I have to say my ideas about what non-dual reality might be have, changed over the years as I've, looked more closely and wondered what it might be. I guess maybe the story in my book, Peculiar Stories, it's called Absent Minded, where Uncle E was, he's sitting on a bus stop bench, and his niece comes along with her friend. And he says to them, I was going somewhere and I can't remember where it is. And so I'm sitting here on this bus stop, and could you try to help me remember where I was going? And of course the niece is going, come on, Uncle E, this is stupid. We can't remember something you forgot. But he cajoles them into sitting down to help. And so he's explaining to them how if they just stop looking at their own thoughts and just, maybe their thoughts will arise, maybe they won't. But if they do, don't pay attention to them and just, keep this open space, and maybe this memory of where Uncle E was going will pop into their heads, and then they can tell him and he can go there. So he gets them to try this out, and they don't remember. Nobody remembers where he was going. And so then they repeat the experiment, and, you try to refine it a little bit, and just, try to really contact this, this open space of not knowing where he was going and not trying to figure it out. And so they do this, they try to do it. And the end of the story, of course, they jump up and run off home and remember something they had to do. And then Uncle E remembers, or ostensibly remembers, what he had to do and runs off. But it's really an introduction to that place of not knowing. And so if you're going to ask me what non-dual reality is, I'm just going to say, I don't know.
Can you say it's a place of not knowing, or is that already knowing that it's a place of not knowing and you don't even know that?
Well, yeah, well said. So, I mean, and, ask me next week and I may say something else, but, that's the best I can do right now.
Well, one of the cool things about that story that you related is that Uncle E was getting these two young girls to do experiments and to try something they had never tried before. And then they came with a failure, and then he came up with another proposal that, hey, maybe we did it wrong. Maybe if we kind of just altered this and that, and then it could work. And then in the end, it didn't seem to work. And they were more or less saying, see, I told you you're crazy. And then when they went off, it worked. It did work. So that,
yeah, that's true. That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, it actually did work, And so then they had to be left like, oh my God, it didn't work, but it worked. And then the cool part about many of the stories is that, the niece is embarrassed about what her friends are going to think. And then, so that's about, and that's something that's happening to all of us, We're all embarrassed about really our coming out party, being visible, or, trying things that are different, or not necessarily just falling into line. And I suppose, of course, when you're young, maybe when you're a young child, doesn't matter. But when you're a certain age and young teenager or something, boy, you toe the line. And,
we got to be accepted. We got to be cool.
Yeah, you got to be cool, right?
Yeah.
So somehow, whatever that coolness is, that is a very narrow place. And so then, here as adults, we're still doing the same thing. We're still being cool, or hiding the not cool part. What we think is not cool.
Yeah, I think that is our conditioning, and that is that's part of what would be very nice to let go of for all of us.
What is conditioning?
Oh, I think conditioning is just what happens to a body-mind that's born, and is born in a certain environment, and is subjected to all kinds of stimulus, reinforcement of certain behaviors. There's, of course, genetic conditioning. You might be born with a certain chemical and biological set of circumstances that condition how you respond to information. Patterns are set up. Patterns, that's what we are. We're a set of patterns in action, activated patterns.
Yeah. Do we have to be patterns? You said that's what we are, You could say that's what we're modeling, or that, you could also say that's how we're we're appearing, what we choose to do is to follow patterns, but maybe that's not what we are.
Well, I think it depends on what perspective you're talking from. I mean, I think as a mind-body mechanism, and that comes to believe that it is a self, what that self is, at least this is, I don't know, but I'm just saying where I've come to in thinking about this. What that self is this repetition of conditioned behavior. And we think that there's a thought that is pointing to some entity that is, directing this conditioned behavior. Now, if you want to talk about it from the perspective of no longer believing that belief of a self having fallen away, then yeah, then there's just acting as that, pattern of conditioned behavior, watching it. I mean, the pattern is there, but you just see that there's nothing holding it up, and there's nothing that's, generating the movement of that pattern. It's just a pattern.
Certainly it's not here, right? It's not here now. Somehow it's in a memory, and then we keep choosing it over and over again. And why we keep choosing it, some people say that we have a kind of a basic behavior trait, and then when something new happens, when we're a little bit uncomfortable or we're thrown aback, we retreat to that one behavior trait. It's kind of like we go back into, some people said, a cave, the cave of where we can retreat to, and we say, okay, I'm frustrated, or I'm depressed, or I'm angry, and that's just our typical trait. We always choose that one, and when we don't know exactly what to do. And so then rarely, I mean, would it be, well, that's the word I'm looking for, not adequate, but I mean appropriate. Rarely would it be appropriate. It's back in the cave from a long time ago. One time it worked, and then...
Adyashanti writes about this in his book, Falling into Grace. I don't know if you've read that, but I've just been reading that lately, and I'm finding it quite wonderful. And it's kind of interesting because I went to satsangs with Adyashanti because I lived near where he was when he was starting out. Went to his satsangs for maybe 6-7 years. And I never heard him talk about this stuff before, but now he's talking about really pretty much what you said. I'll put it in his words, which is something happens somewhere in our life that becomes kind of a core issue for us, a core emotional issue. And it's the emotion that we keep going back to. Like you're saying fear or grief or irritation or whatever, that one that we keep falling into. So he talks about going back through the emotion, not through the story about the emotion, but just through experiencing that emotion. And we all have this, I think we all have a primary mode that we fall into, like you were saying. I know I do. I know my overwhelm is a big one for me. When there's any, feeling of things not being some way that I think they should, I'll go into overwhelm. And it's, and it's almost like a dharma bell now. It's like, oh, there's that, that one, that's the one that means like I've fallen off, center somehow. And I'm,
Let's look at overwhelm right now and just say, well, what is it? Like what brings it on?
Well, that's what he's saying, is to find that one thing that we go back to go into the emotion, and then to see way back when, what was the story that we attached to it way back when? Not now, because we attach any story to it now. But there was a story once that was attached to that emotion. And then once that was sort of, when it permeated the body, he says that's where it goes. It goes into the body. And so now at this point, really there almost doesn't have to be a story for that to get triggered. That's, it could be any story, any resistance, any, thinking something should be other than it is, going to that. And then that bodily thing will get activated, which is that core emotional place. And so he encourages people, and he took a couple people through this process in the book of just going back and contacting that particular thing, because if you can get back to the original story and see that it was a story and that it was not, it's sort of like Byron Katie talks about, was not necessarily true. In fact, it was not true. And the conclusions that were drawn from it were not true. I mean, if you can go back and find that with your, one of these key feelings, that it can then be liberated in the body. So I just think it's very interesting. I've been reading that, and I think, yeah, I can see how, I think that's maybe how some of these mind-body mechanisms really work. You know, they've got these laws of physics or whatever.
Yeah.
Chemistry.
Well, how about that story? Is it true? I'll be a Byron Katie now. Is it true?
Which story? Oh, the story I just told?
Yeah.
Of course not. It can't be. But, you know, we play with these as if they're true. You know, we entertain them.
Of course, we say core issue, but really it's not an issue. It's a core solution, maybe. It's like, you know, a response that we're just fixed in and saying that's probably good for now, you know. And it's not really an issue. I don't know. Is it an issue, or is it just a kind of like an ersatz solution that we always go to?
Yeah, I think it's a conclusion we've come to.
Well, not even. It's not even mental, you know. It's just kind of like a habit or a pattern, you know. And then the other thing is it really in your body? I mean, it manifests in your body, but I mean, you don't really have to liberate your body. Your body is totally innocent and free. You just have to see that, you know, right now, things are, let's see, the fine and dandy unfolding of the universe, right?
Yeah, but the key to that is, in your words, you just have to see. You know, that is not maybe so simple.
It's pretty simple to see that this is the fine and dandy unfolding of the universe.
It's pretty simple to see it sometimes.
I think you can always see it, you know, but I mean, I'm not so sure you're not believing that there's something lurking, and that in a few minutes or sooner or later you're going to have to face up to something, you know, so I better do it now. And so you'd maybe prefer to suffer now instead of, and try to bring this, well, maybe even call it overwhelm, you know, because you mentioned overwhelm. There's things you can see about overwhelm too, because I mean, what is overwhelm? It just means there's too many things happening, right?
Right, out of control.
Yeah.
No control, yeah.
But really, there isn't too many things happening because things are just happening one at a time.
Absolutely.
So one more thing that's happening, one of the timers, is that sentence that says, "This is overwhelm." That's just one thing too.
Right, right. But I mean, you know, we can always go to, it's just happening, it's just arising, you know. But like you said earlier, way back, you know, it's really about how we live our lives. And it's really about how these things that we see and understand come through our lives.
How we let them come through, right?
I don't know.
Well, they come through anyhow, but I mean, you know, we can either kind of deny them or we can celebrate them.
Right, or be curious about them.
Right on.
Yeah.
And curious just means like run a few experiments, maybe, just exactly what you wrote about, how you structured your book.
Yeah, just to be open to all possibilities.
Yeah. Can I read a story?
Sure, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah? I want to read The Train because that one's short, you know, and that one's cool.
Oh, yeah. I always read that one too because it's short.
Yeah. Okay, let me see if I can see it. Let me see if not with these glasses, but let me see. Yeah, let's see if these glasses change. Oh yeah, I can see with these, I think. Train by Mora Fields. This is not a very long story because it only took about 5 minutes to happen. And it's not even much of a story when you think about it. The only reason I'm even writing it here is because it keeps getting stronger and stronger in my thoughts, the older I get. If it keeps on getting into my attention like this, it'll probably take over my whole life by the time I'm 12. Uncle E and I were walking down the old beach highway. The old highway has only one lane in each direction. First you come to a dirt path, then the railroad tracks, and then the old highway. On the other side is the big new highway, which has 2 lanes in each direction. After that, you come to the edge of the cliffs, and the ocean past that. We walked on the dirt path next to the railroad tracks. It was just at the end of springtime when the air is not too warm yet, but the sun is out real bright. The ocean was wearing its turquoise color that day with white ruffle waves. After a while, we heard the train whistle, which I always think is exciting because, pretty soon you'll be lucky enough to see the train close up. And sure enough, in a few minutes we saw the engine coming around the bend, pulling a huge, long freight train. Freight trains are my favorites because they have so many different kinds of cars. Some have writing on the sides, some are like big shiny tanks, and some are like flat cars with interesting stuff like pipes and machinery strapped onto them. So we stopped walking and looked out at the tracks and the new highway and the ocean and got ready for the show. Before it got there, Uncle E asked me, "You know how you can see the spaces between the cars when the train goes by, and the spaces look like they're flashing?" "Yeah," I said. "I always thought that looks pretty cool." "Well, I was wondering, do you think the train is the main thing and the space between the cars is the background? Or are we looking mostly at the spaces and the train cars are just passing through it?" I had to shake my head a couple of times to try to shake some sense into what he said, but I didn't get very far. I guess he could tell that, so he explained it again. "I mean, is the train in the background or in the foreground?" Since this is the question I had never spent even 1 second worrying about, I just looked at him with my mouth kind of open and wondered why anyone would even think up a question like that. But I didn't have to come up with an answer because just then the train got so loud we couldn't talk anyway. We just went to our train watching mode, which Uncle E says is an altered state if there ever was one. Unfortunately, he'd planted this dumb question in my brain, so I couldn't help looking at the train cars and the spaces and trying to see which was in front. The strange thing was, I could look at it one way, and the train cars were in front, whizzing by, and the spaces that flashed behind them. Then I could look at it the other way, so that the space was the main thing, and the train cars were making a brief appearance in the middle of it. Next time Uncle E asked me about train cars and spaces, I told him about how I could see it both ways. And he said that was the answer he'd come up with, too. Then he said that most of his life was the same way, that you could switch what was in front and what was in back, and what was more important and what was less important, just by the way you decided to look at it. So, for instance, you could make your thoughts about something to be in front of a fine and dandy way the universe rolls along, and give the thoughts a lot of importance. Or you could put them in the background and just look at the fine and dandy unfolding of the universe. Like when you get your feelings hurt because you get picked next to last for the soccer team in PE class. But still, it's a breezy blue day, and you're glad you're outside instead of reading a book about some war 500 years ago. You can choose if you want the hurt feelings mood or the appreciating the sky mood to be the main thing. I have to tell you, that train watching has never been quite so much fun as it used to be because that irritating question is always hanging around. And I even hesitate to tell you about it because you might have to think about it too whenever you watch a train. So maybe you better not read this story.
That's great. I've never heard anyone else read one of the stories aloud, so that was really interesting. You read it well, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I actually had an Alzheimer's patient read this story, and he kind of pretty well made it through, and I think he really got it too.
Wow.
I mean, he really enjoyed. You could see that he was really turning on and enjoying the difference, between those two things, and it's realizing there was some freedom there.
Wonderful.
But I'm not so sure that he took it any farther because we weren't in front of a train to watch it, or whether he was really experimenting with it, or but he kind of got it.
Mm-hmm.
And that he had kind of given up reading a long time ago, really.
That's interesting. Maybe, have you tried any of the other stories with him?
Well, I want to have him read this one a couple more times because he has a daughter that's not that old, and she's not young like 10, but she's somebody that he talks to, and that maybe they should have some activities together, and he could read a few stories. and it
Yeah.
would probably be really great, for both
Interesting.
of them.
Yeah. I wrote this book because when my daughter was a child, 6, 7, I was always looking for books that might mm, just point her in different directions, raise questions. And I was amazed at how few there were. Now, times have changed and there are better kids' books out there in this regard. But, this is what, almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And the only books I could find, I'd go to these spiritual bookstores and metaphysical bookstores, and and they were either coming from the teachings of some religious tradition, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, Christianity, or they were very feel-good kind of, we are all one and we feel so wonderful and we all love each other kind of books. Which are nice too, but I mean, it's just that I don't think kids believe that because that isn't what they see.
Well, they do and they don't, because there's a time when the kid believes everything.
Right.
But I mean, in a way, it's really very gross guidance, I mean, when we really believe that we have to civilize an infant, and that it's up to us, to really make that infant be able to handle this society. And maybe we rough them up too, because we think that society's rough and they got to be callous in a way. They got to have a thick skin. And I've been investigating for about 4 months different what they call free schools or democratic schools, where there's no curriculum.
Uh-huh.
And then kids just find their own interest, and then it's real and it's authentic, and I'm not so sure whether it works good or not. In some cases it seems like in theory it could really work good, but in other cases it seems like it might take years for kids to really find their interest, because so many false interests are planted in them, already. I mean, like, I don't know, video games and stuff. I wonder if that's really a cool thing to do, or if that's that interesting. Maybe it's interesting because they're in a way forbidden, and they'd say, oh no, get serious, you got to do your homework, no more video games tonight. And so then you kind of, anything that's forbidden seems to be like something you want to do even more, right? And that's one cool thing about the free schools, is that nothing's forbidden. So then you're able to work through things and find out. At least with me, I don't know, my whole life, I mean, I would really concentrate on things and then burn them out in a way. Once I kind of, you seem to be interested in things that you almost have, you can almost get. But I mean, when you got it, then move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting. Are you doing a video about the schools? Because I've just heard a lot about various school philosophies over my lifetime, and it almost seems, I mean, some of them seem to work and some of them don't. And even some of the most wonderful sounding free schools go up in flames because
I guess there's been a few in Chicago that closed, Well, the first one I found was talking to, it was in Vancouver, and it's a Windsor House. I was talking to Canella Michelle, and she said, oh, I moved here so my kids could go to this school. And so then I contacted Helen Hughes, which is the director and founder, and I did a talk with her, an interview with her, and put a movie of the school on. And then I found out that those schools here, they have another name. Anyhow, in Massachusetts, they have a free school. It's kind of the oldest one around in the States, and maybe there's 30 of them that are following them. Turns out that there's one that's really close to me, just a couple of miles away, and it's called Tall Grass. And I went in there and did some videos, but it was right at the end of the semester, and they're closed now. And so then I just wanted to have a video day. But it was very few of the kids that wanted to do a video. You know, they were kind of curious, but they kept their ground, their distance. You know, only the young ones actually, the 5-year-olds and maybe the 8-year-olds were loving it, and they wanted to do another one and another one. You know, some were totally into their computers, and they were just they didn't have much of an attention span at all. They tried a little bit, and then all the ones that I really wanted to video were the older ones, and they were just, oh, no way, you know, I'm fine. That's okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can encourage kids to be more authentic with our schools if we can actually get those kind of philosophies into schools. But I think, I mean, we're conditioned by being human, you know, and so we're going to get conditioned one way or another. And maybe we can make that less binding or something by these kinds of schools and different kinds of parenting. And, you know if I were to be a parent again, I would do it so different than I did it. I mean, I remember, you know, when my daughter was little, I mean, we were all encouraged, all of us parents, to make your children feel special and to, you know, constantly be pointing out how well they did something and what a great person they were. And, you know, I mean, I think there's certainly room to love your child and delight in them. But I mean, I look back at that and I see how much I was encouraging her to be somebody, you know.
In a way, that whole thing is a compensation, right?
Compensation for what?
Well, it's compensation how we don't like ourselves.
Yes.
How we don't feel special. So then we want our child not to have to go through that.
Yeah. That's part of it. And part of it is that we think, I mean, I really thought that was going to be a good thing for her at the time.
I think we all think that what we're doing in this moment is the best and highest good, you know. And then later, if we're open to it, we can find out that, oh my God. Yeah.
But it's kind of, you know, we don't have to take credit or responsibility, really. I mean, it just, whatever happened, happened.
Right. In the past, it's useless, totally useless.
Yeah.
Just you can't modify a memory. But anyhow, I mean, I guess you can forgive yourself for it, a memory. I don't know what. But let me say, conditioning. Maybe you can be conditioned. Number one is to be open, you know, and which I said is be visible, you know, so you can, and then you could be conditioned to try different things, like experiment, and then maybe act things out too, because sometimes in the acting you can see it better, and so even doing skits or things like that, you know, or somebody in another part of the country is actually, how can I explain it? She's an activist in a way, but she has people in the community put on a pageant or something like that, you know, a pageant to protect the park, or a pageant to clean up the river or something like that. And the kids write stories and, well, maybe about frogs or something like that, and then they act them out on the riverfront, and you know, they'll make a whole pageant of it. But there is a point to it too. The point is kind of like, shouldn't we treat the environment better? And so then it's kind of like, when you act it out, it kind of, well, first of all, you have to be open and visible and accept each other. And I suppose the best way to accept each other, or to feel you're accepted, is to start accepting other people. Somehow you can make the first step in that way, as a child or as an adult.
Yes, I think there's a lot of virtues, I guess, that could be educated into children that aren't. And they would probably be very helpful. But I still think, you know, we're stuck with being human, and we're just going to have to, you know, butt our heads up against it until we don't want to anymore.
Right. But I mean, the good part is that you just said there's a lot of virtues that can be taught to children, and you were an author, and you probably have a whole lot more stories in you that are about ready to pour out. So we're all counting on you, Mora Fields.
Great, I'll get busy.
Yeah, come out and join the party and give those kids and those adults some more options, and tell them to put them into action and see what happens when they do that, and then for them to be the judge. You're not going to tell them which is the best or which is the right way, but I mean, engage
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like we got to get shook up, to start thinking out of the box. Have you seen that book called, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's called Astonish Yourself?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you should look for that. It's wonderful. It's a French guy whose name is gone, but he's written these I think it's 101 experiments or something. And they're very short. They're like, a page long or something. And he has all these experiments about, just doing these, seemingly bizarre sorts of things, like yelling your name out over and over and over, for an hour or something like that.
Oh
And
boy.
just and they're things you just wouldn't do, but somebody says, okay, try this. So you try it, and it's like, whoa, that was a whole different experience.
Oh yeah. Well, my wife's on vacation. I could do it, maybe. You better get that name, and I'll put that link on under the
Sure.
video.
I'll email you.
Yeah. The last guy I talked to was really kind of amazing, on his website. He's actually a rebirther or works with breath a lot. And
Uh-huh.
he's also a musician. And some of his music tracks, I just turned one on, and it took me a long way away. He started out with like what I would call rebirthing breathing or something like that, but that was the rhythm section, kind of like. That was kind of like the rhythm section. I mean, oh my God, it was electric.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other part was, and of course he was doing it real well, I mean, but something like that was the other instrument,
Mm-hmm.
It was just a mind blower.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's the whole thing, stuff that we normally screen out of our daily experience, just check it out.
Not
I,
even to
I
screen it out. I mean, it never crossed our minds, right? Nobody ever suggested that we could
right,
be different, It
right.
just didn't come on the radar.
Yeah, this guy I heard speak years ago, gosh, I can't remember his name either. He was some Brazilian teacher. And was it him? Yeah, I think he told a story about being in an apartment with two people. I guess he was a guest or something. And they sat down, and they were sitting on either side of him, and they both started talking to him about entirely different things, carrying on these like nonstop monologues, one in each ear, and how it totally turned his mind inside out, and he was trying to keep track of these two stories going on simultaneously. And he said something happened where just the space opened up, where he was absolutely able to track some way that wasn't his regular auditory way, to track both of these conversations after a certain point and to be in both of them. I thought that was like, well, there's a different experiment,
Right. As
Experiments,
long and the main part of that experiment is not to reject it and saying these
right.
guys are off the wall. These guys are all in their head. These guys aren't considering me. These guys, and all these other kind of stories, these reactions, and once you don't have to believe those reactions, or they don't. If they come up, they come up, I guess. But if they don't, then it can be a whole new world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, let's long live experiments. I mean, I know that they're wonderful for me. The more open I can be to some weird thing that comes along, the possibilities are amazing.
I really am counting on you to write a few down and to come up with a couple of more peculiar volumes.
I've actually thought of a few, but I haven't really taken pen to paper yet, or keyboard to.
Yeah, and I love the way you do it, like where you don't say this is right or this is wrong, and you kind of do it in a mystifying way, like, oh my God, I could do this, and that was a cool way to do that with an uncle and a young niece, and
Yeah,
it was a
I'm
kind of yeah.
I'm thinking of putting a boy in the next one if I get to the next one, to the next book, because unfortunately, I think it's more true that girls will read stories with boys in them than it is that boys will read stories with girls in them. So I thought maybe if I put a boy in there, it might appeal to some of the that gendered folk.
Right.
But we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, but I'll need a boy editor, because
Right.
I don't
Because
have that.
you didn't have a son, huh?
I don't have a son. Didn't have a brother. They're foreign creatures as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Mora Fields. Thank you so much for coming on. I think
No,
we're
thank you. It's been
having
fun. I
having a
don't know
good
what we've been
time,
talking.
right? We're having a good time, huh?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I had fun. Thank you.
Who knows? We might even sell a book or two.
There we go.
And get something going for O Street Publishing.
Right. Should I say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us about O Street.
Okay. Yeah, so this book is published by O Street Publishing, which is a very small, very independent book publisher in Eugene, Oregon. And I've kind of decided that, well, for one thing, I didn't think about this when I wrote this book, but if you write a book, you've also got to try to sell it these days. Even apparently with big publishers, if your book is carried by a big publisher, you're the one that has to do most of the marketing, unless you're a bestseller or huge name person. And so I haven't done much of that, and I'm really not too interested in doing much of that. So I think my only way to sell this book is to do little things like this and see if people might be interested.
Fantastic.
It is on Amazon.com, but
yeah, fantastic. Because I agree. I know people that have several books, and they're just a pile of books there that they're trying to give away, basically, because they don't know how to sell it. So all the best of luck on that one.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's funny. I'm not really worried about it. I mean, I figure it's not a timely topic or anything, so I've got hundreds of years to sell them.
Yeah.
At least.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. It was fun. I'll send you the name of that French guy with his 101 experiments.
All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Mora. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and another episode. You can be on. Join the fray. Express your ideas. Come out and be real, and all those kind of things. Those are only suggestions. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.